Are you untouched? The words struck like a claw to the throat, sharp, unforgiving, and far too loud for a room thick with wine, smoke, and power. Alina Hart's fingers paused on the stem of her goblet, the blood-red liquid within trembling slightly as she lifted her gaze across the long obsidian table. Lucien Draven, the Alpha King himself, sat at the head of the gathering, his black shirt stretched tight across broad shoulders, his storm-gray eyes locked on her like a predator who just scented prey. Every low murmur in the hall went dead silent. "Excuse me?" she said, uncertain she'd heard him right. "You heard me." His voice was colder this time, hungrier, deadly. "Are you still untouched, Alina Hart?" Her cheeks flushed crimson, fury rising fast. It had been 2 weeks since she'd arrived at the castle to serve as a lowly healer for the royal pack. 2 weeks of quiet, of keeping her head down, of pretending she didn't notice the king watching her like she was already his. She should have blushed. Should have backed down. Instead, she tilted her head, lips curling with false sweetness. Losing it today, actually. And, just like that, everything exploded. The goblet slipped from Alina's hand. It didn't shatter, it landed with a muffled clink on the stone table, but the moment it did, it was like the entire hall exhaled as one, stunned into a thick, watchful silence. Lucien Draven hadn't moved. Not yet. He sat like a carved statue at the head of the table, the flickering torchlight dancing across the ridged muscles of his forearms, the obsidian buttons of his shirt undone just enough to show the swell of his collarbone. But his eyes, his wolf-gray, storm-ridden eyes, were locked on her like they could burn holes into her skin. Alina swallowed, blood rushing in her ears. She hadn't meant to say it like that, hadn't meant for it to sound like a challenge. But something about his voice, his question, the audacity of it, "Are you untouched?" had flipped a switch inside her. She didn't come to this castle to be anyone's little lamb, least of all his. But now she stood at the edge of something she didn't understand. He rose. Not in a rush, not like a man losing control, but with the calm calculation of a predator who knew he didn't need to run to catch his prey. He placed his palms flat on the table, knuckles white, then pushed back his chair, the scrape of wood against stone echoing like a war drum through the hall. She'd seen him angry before. When Jackson had brought back a bleeding scout from the southern border, when a young Omega had spilled water on the throne room map. But this wasn't anger. This was something darker, possessive, primal. The rest of the royal court sat frozen. Celine, the king's most trusted advisor, glanced between them with wide, unreadable eyes. Kalen, alpha of the Western Ridge Pack and longtime rival, leaned back in his chair with a grin pulling at the corner of his mouth, clearly enjoying the show. Rowan looked like he wanted to disappear entirely. Even the guards at the door tensed just enough to know they'd felt the shift in the room's energy. Lucien didn't take his eyes off her as he walked the length of the table. Not once. Alina forced herself not to step back. He stopped a breath away. She had to crane her neck to look up at him, even in her heeled boots. His jaw clenched once, twice, and then, "You think this is a game?" His voice was low. Not loud enough for the others to hear clearly, but she felt every syllable like it had been growled straight into her skin. "You think saying something like that in front of them?" Her heart thundered. "I think you asked me an insulting question in front of them. So I answered." He stared at her like he didn't know whether to strangle her or cage her. "You don't understand what you've done," he said tightly. "Then explain it," she snapped, louder than she meant. Her voice bounced off the walls, drawing more stares. "Because if I meant to walk around this castle mute and meek, you should have said so when I arrived. You're under my protection, Alina. You never told me I needed protection. You just announced to a room full of alphas that you're untouched and apparently willing to lose that at any moment. Do you have any idea what that means to them?" She faltered. Lucien stepped in closer. His scent hit her first cedar and winter and something dark she didn't have a name for. His voice lowered again, meant for her ears alone. "In our world, saying something like that is a declaration. It's an opening, and you just made yourself a target." "I was joking," she said, but it came out softer this time. "It doesn't matter," he bit out. "Perception is everything. And now they're all wondering if the king's little healer is available for the taking. He looked past her briefly, at the row of guests watching like hawks. Kalen raised his goblet slightly in mock toast. Lucienne's jaw ticked again. Come with me. She didn't have a choice. Not really. Not with the temperature of the room plummeting and Lucienne's aura practically dragging her out the door. He didn't touch her. But every step behind him felt like being pulled by invisible string by command, not courtesy. The corridor outside the great hall was colder. Quieter. But no less tense. He stopped halfway down the hallway, then turned sharply to face her. She crossed her arms. You embarrassed me in there, he said. I embarrassed you, she asked, incredulous. You asked me if I was untouched. In front of half the dominance in the realm. I had to know. Why? So, you could. Claim me? Punish me? Use it as leverage? Her voice cracked despite herself. I'm not some omega to auction off. Lucienne. Something flickered in his eyes. You're not, he said, and the softness in his voice startled her more than the fury had. That's the problem. She blinked. What? He exhaled sharply, scrubbing a hand down his face. For the first time since she met him, he looked tired. You were never supposed to draw attention. You were meant to pass through the court quietly. Heal a few wounded. Stay in the background. That was the safest way. Safe from what, Lucienne? He didn't answer. Safe from you? She pressed. Yes. The word was blunt, brutal, honest. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Heat rose up her neck, not from embarrassment but confusion, anger, something else. He stepped forward again. Slowly. Measured. His voice was a low rasp now. Every day. I feel it. The bond. Gnawing at my control. You walk into a room, and I forget centuries of law, of strategy, of what it means to be king. And tonight, when you joked about giving yourself to anyone, I nearly lost it. She stared up at him, heart thudding like it wanted out of her chest. There's a part of me, he continued, that wants to throw you over my shoulder, lock you in my rooms, and make damn sure no one ever looks at you like that again. The words shouldn't have thrilled her. But they did. Goddess, they did. His hands twitched at his sides. But I can't, he said. Because I am the king. And you? I'm not just a healer, she finished for him. No, he said, voice hoarse. You're something else, and I don't know what that means yet. But I will find out. The air between them thickened. Her body ached with the effort it took to stay still. Is that why you brought me here? She asked, barely above a whisper. Because of what you felt. He didn't deny it. Was it ever just about healing? No, he admitted. Never. Something inside her trembled, not fear, but the weight of inevitability. She turned to go. Alina, he said, voice sharper again. No more jokes like that. Not in public, not with Kalen watching. She paused, glanced back. And what about in private? His eyes darkened. You keep pushing me, little healer, he growled. And one day, I will snap. She didn't smile. But the flicker in her eyes said enough. I'm counting on it. And she walked away, leaving the Alpha King standing in a corridor of shadows, breathing like he'd just survived a battle he wasn't sure he'd won. Lucienne didn't summon her. He didn't need to. The guards found her the next morning, just after sunrise, when the mist still clung to the castle's high terraces and the training fields were ghostly and silent. They didn't speak, just stood outside the infirmary with those silver-stitched uniforms and blank expressions, waiting like statues with orders carved into their bones. Alina didn't argue. Not with them. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, ignored the tremor in her fingers, and followed them through the endless stretch of corridors. This part of the castle north tower, past the observatory, wasn't somewhere she was allowed. She knew that. Everyone knew that. But today, no one stopped her. The guards left her at a tall black door with a carved moon crest at its center. No words, no escort, just a silent expectation that she'd enter and accept whatever came next. She did. The room was massive, dark, windowless, warmed only by a hearth glowing in the corner. Books lined the shelves in uneven stacks. Maps lay rolled across a stone table, thick with wax seals and claw marks. And at the far end of the room, beneath the shadow of an ancient wolf carving etched into the wall, stood Lucien Draven. He didn't look up when she entered. His back was to her, sleeves rolled, hands braced on the edge of a desk like he was holding the weight of a world she couldn't see. His black shirt clung to his frame, shoulders flexed, muscles coiled tight like he'd been standing there for hours. "You're late," he said. "I wasn't summoned," she replied. That got his attention. He turned, slowly, eyes narrowing the way they always did when he was deciding whether to devour someone or dismiss them. Alina held her ground. Lucien's eyes raked over her. Not with hunger, not yet, but with something colder, calculating. She recognized the look. It was the same one he gave incoming alphas during territory negotiations. It wasn't personal. It was strategic. "Come here," he said. Her breath caught. There were 1,000 reasons to turn and leave. But she couldn't. Something in her bones whispered that walking away now meant turning from something important, something that had already begun. She stepped forward, careful, slow, until only the desk separated them. Lucien reached into a drawer and pulled out a small vial of crimson liquid. Thick, opaque. It shimmered under the firelight with an unnatural gleam. He set it between them. "Do you know what this is?" Alina shook her head. "Your blood," he said. "From the cut you got 3 nights ago." She frowned. "You took it?" "I had it taken," he corrected. "And tested." "You test all your healers?" "Only the ones who make me feel like I'm losing my fucking mind." Her heart thumped hard enough to echo. Lucien circled the desk, slow, deliberate. The heat of his body reached her before his voice did. "Your scent is wrong," he murmured. "It changes. It pulls. No Omega smells like that, no healer. And then there's your blood." He held up the vial again, studying it like a relic from a forgotten age. "Royal blood burns brighter. It carries traces of moonstone, woven through centuries of sacred lines. You have it." Her breath left her in a rush. "That's impossible," she said, but it sounded hollow even to her. "It should be," he agreed. "The last of the royal bloodline was executed 2 decades ago. Every record says the same." She took a step back, but he followed, closing the distance. "Except you," he whispered. "You exist. And you're here." Alina shook her head. "I'm not a princess. I was raised in a healer's den by a woman who barely spoke to me unless someone was dying. And yet," Lucien growled, "your scent nearly brought me to my knees the first time you walked past me. Your blood hums like silver fire. And there's something else." He stepped even closer, voice dropping to something lethal. "Show me your back." "What?" "Your back," he repeated, eyes dark. "Now." "No." She flinched. "What are you?" "Alina," he snapped. "If I'm right, if the mark is there, I need to see it." She hesitated. Every part of her screamed no. But another part, a quieter one, older than reason, told her she already knew what he'd find. Wordless, she turned, reached up with shaking hands to pull the shawl from her shoulders, slid the neckline of her tunic down, inch by inch. Lucien said nothing for a long time. Then, a sound. Not quite a growl. Not quite a gasp. She felt the heat of him draw closer. His fingers, warm, careful, trembling, brushed her skin. Right between her shoulder blades, where the skin curved inwards like a dip carved by time. "That mark," he whispered, "is the mooncrest." She turned sharply to face him. "That's a myth." "It's not," he said. "It's a sigil, an ancient one. Carried only by those born of the first line. Royal born. Moon-blessed. Sacred." Alina stared at him, stunned. No one's called the line sacred in years, not since the massacre. "Because they were a threat to power. A threat to me." He said it without flinching. "But I never wanted them dead. That was the High Council's doing. I was 19 when the executions happened. I wasn't strong enough to stop it." He looked away. "And now, 20 years later, a girl with moonblood shows up in my court. Hiding. Healing. Joking about giving herself to someone else. His voice broke on the last word. Alina stepped back, but he caught her wrist, gentle but firm. "You can't stay invisible anymore," he said. "Not with that mark. Not with that blood." She yanked her arm free. "I didn't ask for this." "No one does," Lucienne replied. "But we don't always get to choose what the moon makes of us. You think I'm a threat. I think you're my undoing." The words stopped her cold. Lucienne moved to the window. The one slit of light allowed in from a high arch. "When I was a boy," he said quietly, "my mother told me the moon would gift me a mate I wouldn't deserve. Someone with fire in her blood and silver in her soul. Someone who would challenge me, break me, make me choose between power and something far more dangerous." He looked at her then, and gods, he looked wrecked. "I never believed her. Until you walked in." Alina wrapped the shawl back around her shoulders, trying to steady the wild thunder in her chest. "I'm not ready for any of this," she whispered. "I know," he said. "I don't even know who I am." "We'll find out. Together." The silence stretched, long and heavy. "Does anyone else know?" she asked. "Only me, and now you." She swallowed hard. "How long do I have before the others notice?" Lucien didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was grim. "Not long. Kaelin suspects. Celine's watching you closer every day. That mark on your back? If someone sees it, they'll understand what you are, and what you represent." "And what do I represent, exactly?" Lucienne stared at her like she was the beginning and the end of something sacred. "Hope," he said. "Or war." Alina stood there, frozen, heart hammering. Lucienne stepped closer again, slow this time. Measured. His hand lifted, cupping the side of her face. Not forceful, not possessive. Just there, solid, steady. "I'll protect you," he murmured. "Even if it costs me everything." And, for the first time since stepping into the castle, Alina didn't feel like prey. She felt like prophecy. And that terrified her, more than anything else. The room was different when she returned. Alina didn't notice it at first, too distracted by the feel of Lucien's fingers still lingering on her skin, the echo of his words looping in her mind like a low chant. "You carry the moon crest. You are royal. You are prophecy." But the moment she stepped back into the healer's wing, she knew. Her things were gone. The narrow cot where she'd slept, the woven basket with her herbs, the charm carved from ashwood that she'd kept since she was 6, it was all missing. In its place stood a man she'd only seen once before, Rowan, one of Lucien's inner circle. Silent, sharp-eyed, lean like a blade that never missed its mark. He nodded once. "Come with me." Alina hesitated. "Why?" "Orders." "From who?" His brows twitched upward. "You really have to ask?" The walk was short, but silent in a way that screamed. No one looked at her. No one spoke. She noticed the way doors closed softly as she passed, how even the servants lowered their heads. It was like the entire castle knew what she was before she had time to figure it out herself. The new room was twice the size of the healer's quarters. Thick velvet drapes, pale moonstone walls, and a canopied bed carved with ancient wolves, a fire already burned in the hearth. There was no warmth in it. "I don't want this," she said, stepping back. Rowan didn't move. "It's not about want. I was fine where I was. You're not fine anywhere now." She glared at him, fury rising. "Because I'm marked? Because of my blood?" He looked at her for a long moment, and something in his face, so carefully neutral, cracked just a bit. "No," he said quietly. "Because of his." Before she could ask what that meant, he was gone. The door shut behind him with a heavy thud, locking with an audible click. She stood in the silence for a long time, hands clenched, chest rising and falling in fast, shallow breaths. She didn't cry. She wanted to. But crying was for girls who didn't have sigils burned into their backs and kings watching them like the world might end at any second. Later, when she finally climbed into the bed, too soft, too wide, too wrong, she thought she might drift into sleep. But the moment her eyes shut, she felt it. The pull. It wasn't a whisper. It wasn't a call. It was a tether. It stretched from her chest, through the stone walls, down the winding halls, and anchored itself in him. Lucien. His presence slammed into her senses, hot, volatile, familiar in a way it shouldn't be. She felt his thoughts brushing against hers, flickers of emotion bleeding through, tension, hunger, restraint. And underneath it all, something darker. A storm. She gasped, sitting up fast. The bond. The mate bond. It was waking up. She could feel him now. Not just his proximity, but the ache in his shoulders, the weight behind his breathing. The way his fingers curled into fists. He was alone, somewhere near, pacing. And she knew without question that he felt her too. Alina swung her legs over the edge of the bed, heart hammering. The door opened before she touched it. Lucien stood there. He looked wrecked. His shirt was half unbuttoned, hair disheveled, eyes wild like he'd been running from something only to find it standing in front of him. "I told them not to lock you in," he rasped. "I felt you," she said. He nodded once. Slow. The silence between them thrummed. The air was too tight. Charged like a sky seconds before lightning. "The bond's awakening," she whispered. "I know. How long have you known?" Lucien's jaw tensed. "Since the night of the feast. When you said—" She flushed. "Oh." He stepped into the room. Didn't touch her, just stood there, breathing like each inhale was a fight. "It's strong," he said, voice raw. "Too strong. Too soon." "What does that mean?" "It means, if I take you now, if I give in, there's no going back." Alina's throat dried. "Isn't that what mates do?" "Yes." His eyes flared gold. "And no." He turned away from her, hands braced on the mantel, shoulders taut with restraint. "You don't understand what this bond does, Alina. To you, to me." "Then explain it." He didn't answer. "So," she walked closer. Stopped just behind him. "Lucien," she said softly. "Are you afraid?" That made him turn. He looked at her then, truly looked, and whatever walls he'd built over the years, whatever iron shields a king like him had to wear, they cracked. "I am terrified," he said. She swallowed hard. "Of me?" "No," he whispered. "Of what you make me want." His hands came up, framing her face, barely touching. His fingers hovered like he was afraid of breaking something delicate and vital. "When I feel the bond stirring," he said, "I forget who I am. What I've promised. What I've sworn never to take." "You mean control," she whispered. "Yes." His voice trembled. And then, just once, his thumb brushed the corner of her mouth. The jolt of it ran straight to her soul. She saw it happen. Saw the exact moment Lucien's restraint nearly snapped. His body leaned in, his lips parting like they wanted to claim, devour, mark. And then, he tore himself away. No words. No explanation. Just a rush of air and the slam of the door behind him. Alina stood there, breathless, aching, burning from the inside out. She touched her chest, where the bond still pulsed like a second heartbeat. It wasn't done. Not yet. But it had begun. And nothing would be the same again. That night, she couldn't sleep. She paced the room, restless. The bond tugging at her like a thread around her ribs. It didn't hurt, it yearned. A dull ache that came in waves, strongest when Lucien was near. Weaker when he was not. But never fully gone. She wanted to run to him. She wanted to curse him. She wanted to demand answers for things he barely had the courage to admit aloud. Instead, she curled up on the edge of the too-wide bed and stared at the flames until the light blurred. By morning, she had made a decision. If he wouldn't tell her what this bond meant, she'd find out herself. She was done being guarded. Done being hidden. She was moonmarked. And no locked room, no king, no prophecy could keep her from discovering why. The library was older than the castle itself. Alina had heard whispers about it from the kitchen staff, tales of hidden archives carved into the bones of the mountain, of sealed scrolls and forbidden ledgers, of knowledge locked away beneath layers of dust and silence. But no one had told her how it felt. The weight of it. The chill that clung to your skin as soon as the stone door clicked shut behind you. She shouldn't have been able to enter, not without permission. But Rowan's key still sat in her pocket from the night before, when he delivered her new clothes in stony silence and walked away without waiting for a thank you. He hadn't said a word about the small brass ring he left behind. Maybe he hadn't meant to. Or maybe he had. She followed instinct more than memory as she moved down the rows of carved shelves, each step echoing faintly in the cold. Her fingers drifted over spines wrapped in worn leather and bindings stitched with moon thread. Names leapt out at her: kings, alphas, bloodlines, treaties, but none sparked recognition. Not until she reached the stone wall at the far end of the chamber. A single crest was carved there. The same one she'd seen in Lucien's war room, half hidden beneath maps and sigils. The moon crest. Her birthmark. Her legacy. Her undoing. Alina pressed her palm against the carved stone. It was cool under her skin, rough and ancient. Something pulsed beneath it. A click. The wall split open. Dust billowed in lazy curls as the hidden shelf revealed itself. She coughed once, then leaned in, heart pounding, already knowing what she'd find. There were only a handful of scrolls. Old. Brittle. Tied in dark thread and sealed with wax so faded it looked gray. The topmost one bore her name. Not Alina Hart, not the name the healer's den had given her after the fire. But the name that had haunted her dreams since she was a child. Alina Moonheart. Her real name. Her hands trembled as she broke the seal. The words were careful, penned in a tight, elegant script. Order of execution. By decree of the High Council, all descendants of the Moonheart line are to be eradicated. Effective immediately. Any child found bearing the moon crest shall be considered a threat to the crown and removed without trial. Signed, High Alpha Corvin, witnessed, Celine Vire. Alina stared at the parchment until her vision blurred. It was a death sentence. For her family. For her. Every name on the page burned into her skin like phantom scars. Mother, father, uncle. And at the bottom, scratched in faint red ink, infant unaccounted for. Assumed perished in fire. She dropped the scroll. The room tilted. The infant was her. They'd assumed she'd died. That the fire had swallowed her like it did the rest. She staggered backward, fingers gripping the stone shelf for balance. Her lungs forgot how to work. Her vision narrowed to a single point. They had hunted her bloodline. And Celine Lucien's trusted advisor had witnessed it. Careful where you leave fingerprints, said a voice, smooth as silk, sharp as frost. Alina whirled. Celine stood in the archway, robed in silver, her moon-pale hair pinned up in elegant coils. No guards. No warning. Just her, a ghost among secrets. How long have you been watching me? Alina asked. Longer than you'd like, Celine replied, stepping into the room like she belonged there more than the stone itself. Not long enough, apparently. Alina's fingers clenched at her sides. You signed that decree. I witnessed it, Celine corrected. That's different. You let them kill my family. I was not in power. I was 19. Newly sworn. What did you expect me to do, stand up in front of the High Council and throw myself on the pyre? Alina's jaw tightened. Yes. Celine studied her for a long moment, something flickering behind her eyes, regret, maybe, or recognition. I mourned them in silence, she said. It was all I could afford at the time. Alina didn't answer. Couldn't. I didn't expect the child to survive. Celine added softly. But when I saw you, the moment you arrived at the castle, I knew. And you said nothing? Of course not. Do you think the others would have welcomed you with open arms? They would have slit your throat before the scent of your blood had faded. And Lucien? Celine hesitated. Lucien is complicated. Alina laughed short and bitter. That's one way to put it. Another way is to say he's holding back a storm that will kill us all if we're not careful. Something in her tone changed, then darker, heavier. There are those in this court who believe Lucien has grown weak, Celine said. Soft, too cautious, too merciful. They see your presence as proof. Of what? That the king is ruled by his instincts, by the bond. Alina's skin prickled. You're talking about rebellion. Celine said nothing. But her silence screamed. You're part of it, Alina said slowly. Or you're watching it build. I'm trying to contain it, Celine replied. But Kalen's return has accelerated things. He smells blood in the water and power. The kind of power your name represents. A chill crept down Alina's spine. He knows. He suspects. He's dangerous, but not stupid. Alina shook her head. Why are you telling me this? Because your survival depends on more than Lucien's protection, Celine said, voice cutting through the room like ice. It depends on you learning to play the game. I'm not a player. You don't have a choice anymore. Footsteps echoed down the hall firm, confident, loud in their intention. Celine turned toward the sound. Her expression shifted in a heartbeat cool, unreadable, a court mask worn to perfection. Speak of the devil, she murmured. Kalen entered like he owned the air. His coat was unbuttoned, deep forest green lined with obsidian. His hair dark, messy, falling into eyes that burned gold framed a face too handsome to trust. His smile was slow, sharp, and entirely predatory. Well, he said, gaze flicking over Alina like he was measuring her soul. The king's precious secret. What a pleasure. Alina didn't move. Kalen reached for a scroll on the nearby table, turning it over in his hands as if browsing wares at a market. I always did find history fascinating, he mused. So many old lies dressed up as truth. Alina bristled. You're not allowed down here. He looked delighted. Neither are you. Shall we call the guards on each other? Celine cut in smoothly. Kalen. He tilted his head, amusement barely restrained. Still playing Queen of Whispers, I see. She didn't rise to it. Just turned and walked out without another word. Kalen watched her leave, then returned his focus to Alina. You look like her, you know. Who? Your mother. Alina's breath hitched. She was a thorn in every side that mattered, Kalen continued. Fierce. Beautiful. Impossible to tame. It's a shame they burned her alive. You were there? I was young, he said with a shrug. But not too young to remember a howl that shook the mountains. Alina's throat closed. Kalen stepped closer. She died a queen without a crown. And now here you are, her daughter, standing in the ruins of what could have been a kingdom. Does that make you bitter or hungry? I'm not interested in power. Everyone says that until someone hands them the crown. He brushed a finger along the edge of the table, then turned to leave. Be careful, little moon, he said over his shoulder. The wolves are circling. And the king's too distracted to see the blood already pooling at his feet. He vanished into the shadows, his words lingering long after his scent had faded. Alina stared at the scrolls in front of her, her name still etched in faded ink, the mooncrest burning on her back like it had been reawakened. She wasn't just marked. She was hunted. And somewhere deep in her bones, the truth settled like stone. If she didn't start fighting for herself, no one else would. Lucien found her in the frost gardens, long after sunset. The moon hung low, swollen and pale behind drifting clouds, casting fractured silver across the hedges that curved like frozen waves around her. The air bit at her skin, sharp and clean, but she didn't move from the marble bench where she sat, arms wrapped around her knees, cloak forgotten on the ground beside her. She didn't look at him when he arrived. But she felt him. She always did now. The bond pulsed like a heartbeat behind her ribs, humming softly the moment he stepped into her space. It didn't ask permission. It didn't care for timing. It just was constant and inconvenient and terrifying in its inevitability. You left the library without a guard, Lucien said. Alina kept her eyes on the ice-glazed roses. I didn't know I needed permission to breathe. Silence. Then boots crunching softly over gravel. He didn't approach fully, didn't sit beside her. Just stood a few feet away, watching. Kalen was there, he said. I noticed. His tone sharpened. Did he touch you? Alina turned to look at him then, slow and deliberate. Would it matter if he had? Lucien's jaw clenched so tightly she could see the tension ripple down his neck. Yes, he growled. She stood, wrapping her arms around herself. Why? Because it would have broken some unspoken rule? Because he's a threat to your throne? Or because you've claimed me without saying the words? His breath left in a sharp exhale. That's not fair, isn't it? He stepped closer now. Slowly. The frost crunched under his boots. You don't understand what this bond is, he said. Then explain it to me. She snapped. Because I feel it every time you're near. I feel you when you're angry, when you're tired, when you're fighting yourself not to touch me. I feel you like you're inside me, Lucienne. And I have no control over it. Her voice cracked on the last word. He stopped a foot away, hands fisted at his sides. I didn't want this, he said quietly. Alina's throat tightened. Me, or the bond. A long pause. Then, both. It felt like a slap. She took a step back, but he caught her wrist, not harshly, just enough to keep her from retreating into the cold. Alina, you said you'd protect me, she whispered, voice shaking now. But all you're doing is running. I'm trying to save you, he said. From me. From what I become when this bond takes over. Her eyes were shining now, but she didn't look away. And what is that, Lucienne? What are you so afraid of? He stared at her for a long time. Then, slowly, he brought her hand to his chest, pressed it flat over his heart. It pounded beneath her palm, wild and unsteady. When I bond, he said, voice raw, it consumes me. The king disappears. The wolf takes over, and I don't know how to hold back. I don't know how to stop. That's what happened to my father. He marked my mother before she chose him. Before she was ready. The bond ruined her. She never smiled again. Alina's breath caught. She tried to run, he whispered. He chased her, caged her, loved her so violently it tore them both apart. She felt the tremor in his chest, the weight of memory that shaped every edge of the man before her. I won't do that to you. Her fingers curled against his shirt. I'm not her, she said. And you're not him. You don't know what I am, he said, voice breaking. I know you haven't touched me. I know you hold your breath every time I get too close. I know your control is suffocating you. But you haven't snapped, Lucienne. You've chosen restraint. His eyes were burning now, gold and grief and want all braided into one. She stepped in, close enough to feel the warmth of his skin, close enough to let the bond wrap around them like a storm waiting to break. Her hand lifted, brushed against his jaw. Soft. Testing. Let me choose you, she whispered. Before this bond decides for us. Lucienne's eyes dropped to her lips. His breath came fast now, shallow and rough. Her heart thundered in her chest, and she swore she could feel his echoing the same rhythm. Their mouths hovered inches apart. 1 heartbeat. 2. Then his hands were at her waist, pulling her in, and her fingers curled into the front of his shirt. And their lips almost met. But he broke away. Fast. Violent. Like the moment had burned him. No, he rasped. Alina stumbled back, breathless. Lucienne turned from her, one hand in his hair, the other pressed against the frost-covered wall as if the stone might anchor him. We're not ready. Her voice was small. I am. I'm not. He turned, eyes blazing. If I take you now, if I mark you, it won't be gentle. I've been holding back since the first night you walked into that hall, and if I lose control now, I won't get it back. Alina's lips trembled. You think I want gentle? His expression shattered. She took a deep breath, stepped forward again, slow, controlled. I'm not some fragile flower, Lucienne. I'm marked by the moon. I survived a fire that killed my family. I grew up on scraps and silence. I've lived 2 decades not knowing who I was, what I am. And now I finally do. And I'm done hiding from it. The firelight from the nearby lantern flickered against his face, casting him in shadow and gold. His voice dropped to a whisper. You scare me. Alina blinked. Why? Because you make me want to stop being king, he said. She didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know if there was anything to say. So she did the only thing that felt true. She reached for his hand, laced her fingers with his, and stood with him in the cold, in the dark, with frost beneath their feet and fire between them. They didn't kiss. Not yet, but something passed between them in that moment, hot and tense and unfinished. A promise. A warning. An inevitability waiting to ignite. The summons came at dawn. A folded parchment slipped beneath her door. Bearing the black wax seal of the High Council, a crescent moon clutched in the jaws of a wolf. It wasn't a request. It never was. Not from them. Alina stared at it for a long time before breaking the seal. Her hands didn't shake, not anymore. Not after frost gardens and near kisses, not after scrolls with her name written in the blood of her family. But something in her gut twisted, slow and cold, like a warning she didn't know how to read. She dressed without help. No maids. No guards. Just the silence of her quarters pressing in, and the dull hum of the bond curled low in her chest, a thread that tied her to Lucien no matter how many rooms or walls stood between them. He didn't come for her. She hadn't expected him to. The High Council chamber sat at the highest peak of the fortress, carved into the mountain itself, with no windows and no warmth. It was said the first alphas passed their laws there under the blood moon, that their words still echoed in the stone. Alina felt none of that history as she stepped inside. Only eyes, dozens of them, hungry, measuring, waiting. Lucien wasn't there yet, but Kalen was. He stood near the southern arch, draped in black and green. A wolf in noble skin. He didn't smirk. Not this time. He just watched her with that calculating stare, the kind that made her wonder how many moves ahead he was already playing. Rowan stood beside the council's scribe table, eyes locked straight ahead. He didn't acknowledge her, he didn't need to. And Lyra, who had smiled at her in the halls, offered her honeyed tea and whispered advice, stood with the elders, hands clasped like a priestess awaiting judgment. Alina's heart clenched. They were going to betray her. She felt it in her bones, the same way she felt storms before they broke. The room quieted as the council head, an older wolf with skin like worn bark and eyes that missed nothing, cleared his throat. Alina Hart, he began, voice smooth as oiled stone, you've been summoned to address matters of lineage, allegiance, and threat. She held her chin high. Threat to whom? To order, the head replied. To balance. To the very bonds that hold the packs from war. Kalen stepped forward. The girl bears the moon crest. Murmurs erupted, soft, sharp, immediate. Alina didn't flinch. She is a descendant of the outlawed line, Lyra added, voice smooth, unshaken. A child of the blood that once tried to claim sovereignty over all territories. That was never proven, Alina said. Rowan spoke, voice cold. Her blood was tested. The council has seen the results. The council head turned his gaze to her. Is it true? Do you carry royal blood? I carry the truth of my family's slaughter, she answered. That's all. Deflection, Kalen murmured. Fact, she countered. The head raised a hand. Silence returned like a slap. And do you deny that you are bonded to the Alpha King? That struck harder than she expected. Not because it wasn't true, but because they were using it against her, as if it were a weapon, not a connection. A vulnerability, not a bond. Alina steadied herself. The bond is awakening. And has he claimed you? Lyra asked. No. The word was out before she could think, slicing through the chamber like a blade. She speaks the truth, Rowan said. And for a moment, she thought he might be defending her until he added. Which means she remains unclaimed, unbound, and therefore unprotected. There it was. The knife in the back. Lucien wasn't here. She was alone. No protection. Kalen echoed, stepping into the center. And yet bonded to the king. Convenient, isn't it? For someone with such a dangerous lineage to find herself attached to the throne. This wasn't a plan, Alina hissed. No. Kalen smiled thinly. Then why are you here? Why now? A royal-blooded girl hiding in a healer's cloak, slipping into Lucien's orbit like gravity itself pulled you there. I didn't choose the bond. Perhaps not. But you've certainly benefited from it. She felt the weight of their stares pressing down, squeezing the breath from her lungs. And then, the door opened. Lucien walked in. The chamber stilled. He wore no crown, no ceremonial cloak. Just dark armor over black linen, the symbol of his house stitched across his chest. His eyes were pure storm, unreadable and wild, and they locked onto hers like she was the only person in the room. He didn't ask permission, didn't wait for formality. He strode straight to her side, and when he reached her, he didn't speak to her, didn't touch her. He faced the council instead. "I apologize for my delay," he said, voice low, deliberate. "But I needed to be certain before I spoke." The council head inclined his head. "Certain of what, Your Grace?" Lucien looked at Alina then. Only her. Of who she is. She didn't breathe. Lucien turned back to the chamber. "Alina is not a threat to this court," he said. "She is not a spy. She is not a pretender. She is my intended mate." The room erupted. Shouts. Growls. Shock like a thunderclap. Even Kaelin's mask cracked. Alina stood frozen. Lucien's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "She is bonded to me. The mark is undeniable. The magic cannot be forged. If you doubt the bond, test it. But you'll find that it holds. And yet you haven't claimed her," Kaelin spat. "Why?" Lucien's gaze was pure ice. "Because I respect her right to choose." That silenced even the boldest voices. He stepped closer to Alina now, quiet and slow, until his hand brushed hers. "Alina is more than the blood in her veins," he said. "She is fire and frost. And the only thing in this world I cannot control." She didn't pull away, didn't speak, because there was nothing she could say that wouldn't give her heart away entirely. The council head cleared his throat again. "Then it is settled. The bond is acknowledged. The threat? Paused. But know this. Alpha King, if she turns on you, if she rises against you." "She won't," Lucien said, voice iron. "You trust her that much?" "I love her that much." It wasn't a declaration. It was a reckoning. Alina couldn't move, could barely think. But when he took her hand fully, and the bond surged like fire under her skin, she knew the truth. There was no turning back. Not anymore. Not after this. And especially not with Kaelin watching from the shadows, already planning what came next. The Chamber of the Moon Flame hadn't been opened in over 200 years. The last time a royal bloodline had faced the trial, the floor was still stained with ash. Legends whispered that the fire summoned within those walls wasn't natural flame, but living, sentient magic born from the moon goddess herself, and fed by truth. It did not burn flesh. It burned lies. Alina stood barefoot on the stone, her breath curling in front of her in thin wisps. The room was circular, carved into the mountain's heart, its walls etched with runes too ancient for translation. In the center, a brazier sat cold, silver as bone, waiting. She was alone. At least for now. Lucien had argued until the last second, trying to stop this. But the council was firm. If she wanted to stand beside him, if she wanted to be accepted, bonded, protected by law and by legacy, she had to pass the trial of the moon flame. Magic would test her blood, her heart, her truth. And if she was found wanting, it would devour her. Celine had tried to soften it, explaining the ritual with the care of a woman used to masking cruelty with elegance. But even she couldn't promise safety. Not here. Not with so many watching. Not with Kaelin still circling like a wolf just out of reach, whispering poison in ears that longed for chaos. Alina had tied her hair back with her own hands, worn a simple white shift that now clung to her skin like second breath. Her fingers were scraped raw from the ritual carvings she'd etched into her own palm with a moonstone dagger. And yet she felt steady. Ready. Because the moment Lucien had declared her his intended before the High Council, everything had changed. There was no more hiding. No more pretending she was just a healer with a buried past. She was Moonheart. She was bonded. She was queen-to-be. The doors opened with a groan. The elders entered first, cloaked in gray, faces masked. Celine among them, flanked by 2 apprentices holding vials of blessed oil and silver ash. Kaelin followed, dressed in ceremonial black, his mouth a sliver of smug amusement. And then Lucien. He wasn't supposed to be here. His presence broke every law of neutrality. The Alpha King was meant to remain outside, detached. But there he stood, arms crossed, shadows under his eyes like bruises. He met her gaze and didn't look away. The council head stepped forward. Alina Moonheart, you stand before the trial of the moon flame. Your blood has called the bond. Your lineage has stirred prophecy. Before you are granted place or power, the flame must accept your truth. I understand, she said. Step forward. She moved to the brazier. Selene approached, offering the blade. Alina didn't hesitate. She drew it across her palm, slow and clean. Crimson welled, bright and vivid. She let it drip onto the silver coals. At first, nothing happened. Then the coals hissed and ignited. The flame bloomed, not orange or yellow, but white-blue, shot with violet and silver. It spiraled upward in a column of silent fire, reaching toward the ceiling, casting dancing patterns on every face. The magic surged outward and wrapped around her like a wind. It didn't hurt. Not yet. It probed into her thoughts, her memories, her blood. She felt it skimming the night of the feast, the moment Lucien touched her bare back, the scrolls in the library, the whisper of his lips almost brushing hers. It saw everything, judged everything, and then it paused. A tremor shot through the flame. The violet deepened. The heat intensified. Alina staggered. Something was wrong. She gritted her teeth, fighting to keep her balance. The fire was pushing deeper now, slicing through layers of her mind, her magic, her will. And then, pain. Sharp and sudden. Not from the flame but inside her. Behind her eyes, like a hook dragging through her skull. Sabotage. She knew it in an instant. Someone had tampered with the magic, laced the ritual with something else, something that would mark her as false. Kaelin. He stood too still, too composed, watching her with calm detachment. The flame began to shrink, choking, darkening, turning on her. Lucien moved. No hesitation. No warning. He crossed the floor in a blur of motion, ripping through the circle that was meant to remain unbroken. His hands caught her before she fell. The chamber erupted. Shouts. Gasps. Elders stumbling back. Runes flaring angrily along the walls. Lucien didn't care. He lifted her into his arms, pressing her against his chest. His scent forest and frost and fury wrapped around her, grounding her, shielding her. Stay with me, he whispered. The flame rose again, wild and chaotic. And then, everything stilled. The fire didn't vanish. It moved, shifted, and curled around both of them. It wrapped them in light, in magic, in power. It brushed her skin with cool heat and soaked into her bones. Her blood sang. His breath hitched. The bond snapped into place. Not just the hum of proximity. Not just the ache of longing. It completed. The world narrowed to him. To her. To the shared pulse between them that now thrummed with certainty. Their bond was no longer awakening. It was forged. The fire dimmed. The brazier cooled. Alina opened her eyes. Lucien was still holding her. But something in him had changed. His eyes glowed faint gold. His heart beat in sync with hers. His breath stuttered on every exhale. The magic had recognized them. Not just as fated. As right. But the bond wasn't consummated. Not yet. She could feel the tension still coiled between them like a drawn bowstring. Like a kiss still waiting. A promise unfulfilled. The council head stepped forward, voice quieter now. Almost reverent. The moon flame has spoken. He looked at Alina. You are accepted. He looked at Lucien. And you have broken protocol. Lucien didn't flinch. I saved her. Kaelin stepped forward. Lips tight. You interfered in a sacred rite. And you sabotaged it, Lucien snapped. Kaelin's expression didn't shift. Prove it. Selene spoke then, calm and clear. I'll handle the investigation. The council murmured among themselves, uneasy, but no one dared challenge further. Alina stepped out of Lucien's arms. Her legs were steady, her eyes brighter. She faced them all, the elders, Kaelin, the traitors hiding behind smiles. I've passed, she said. And I remember what happened here. Every lie, every look, every silence. She met Kaelin's gaze. I'm not afraid of fire. You should be. She turned, Lucienne at her side. They left the chamber together. The door shut behind them like a seal. And, for the first time, Alina truly felt the weight of what she had become. Not just bonded, not just accepted, but dangerous. And no one, not even fate, could undo it now. The moon hung low, heavy and golden, bathing the sacred grove in a light that looked like fire and felt like fate. Alina stood barefoot in the circle of white stones, her pulse a quiet drumbeat in her ears. The wind threaded through her hair like fingers, brushing her skin with anticipation. All around them, the trees stood still. Silent witnesses. Guardians of a ritual older than kingdoms. Lucien watched her from across the clearing. His armor stripped away, his tunic open at the throat, exposing skin marked by scars and power. He looked like something carved from night and storm, but his eyes gods. His eyes were nothing but fire and longing. This wasn't just ceremony. It wasn't a performance for council or court. This was the claiming. The bond had been forged in magic, accepted by the flame. But this was where it anchored. In body, in blood, in choice. He stepped into the circle without a word. No crown, no title, just Lucienne, just hers. Alina didn't speak. She didn't need to. She moved to meet him, and the world narrowed until all she could see was him, his breath, his hands, the way his gaze dropped to her lips like he was already tasting what came next. When he touched her, it wasn't tentative, it wasn't soft. It was reverent, fingertips brushing her cheek, trailing down her jaw, then lower, across the hollow of her throat where her pulse beat wild. He didn't rush, didn't speak, just let the bond between them pull taut, thicker than air, deeper than magic. Alina reached for him, fingers sliding over his shoulders, into his hair, grounding herself in the weight of him, the heat of him. She pressed her forehead to his, her breath shallow. I'm not afraid, she whispered. Lucienne's voice was gravel and desire. You should be. Then make me. The kiss broke the night. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was raw, desperate, real. His hands found her waist, her back, pulling her flush against him. Her fingers dug into his spine as the kiss deepened, their bond flaring hot and wild beneath their skin. It felt like being undone and remade all at once. Clothes vanished between touches. The ground welcomed them like prophecy. And when they joined, when Lucienne entered her, and their bodies met with fire and rhythm, and it was like lightning struck the forest itself. The bond exploded between them. Not pain. Not even pleasure. Something other. Like the earth recognizing them. Like the moon blessing them. Lucienne buried his face against her neck, breathing her in like salvation. She moved with him. Every gasp, every cry, every shattered heartbeat pulling them closer to something neither of them could name. When they climaxed together, wild and trembling, the grove lit with a shimmer of silver flame that danced along the stones, then vanished. Alina lay breathless, her body flush against his, heart echoing his rhythm. He stroked her hair with shaking fingers, pressed his lips to her shoulder. I will never let them take you, he said. She believed him. But the peace didn't last. Jackson found them before dawn. He came to the grove, bloodied and pale, his shirt torn, one arm hanging useless at his side. Lucienne was already pulling his tunic on, half shifting when he caught the scent of blood. Alina stood too, wrapping the ritual cloak around her. Eyes sharp. They're coming, Jackson gasped. Kaelin made his move. Lucienne's face went cold. When? Tonight. He's rallying rogue packs. Some of the northern clans have already pledged to him. Said the bond was a trick. Said you've been compromised. Alina's jaw clenched. They think I bewitched you, she said. Jackson nodded grimly. And that the claiming sealed your betrayal. Lucienne didn't speak for a long moment. Then, how many? Too many to ignore. He turned to Alina, reaching for her hand. We fight, she said before he could ask. His grip tightened. Together. The trees stirred. The wind shifted, And somewhere far beyond the grove, a howl rose low and long and full of fury. War was coming. And this time, it was personal. The battlefield stretched before them like a wound carved into the land's scorched earth, cracked stone, and the low rumble of thunder in the distance. Above, the moon hovered full and feral, casting a silver light over the waiting armies. 200 wolves stood behind Lucien, armor gleaming like obsidian fire, eyes glowing in anticipation. Another 100 behind Alina, bound to her not by name or blood, but by something older belief. She wore no crown. She didn't need one. Her presence was enough. Clad in black leather and silver thread, her cloak billowed in the wind, embroidered with the mooncrest that once marked her for death. Now, it signaled power, destiny. Her claim. Lucien stood at her right, sword in hand, his wolf close to the surface. His gaze swept the horizon where Kaelin's forces gathered like a storm, rogues, oathbreakers, turncoats, some with blood still wet on their teeth. And at the front, Kaelin himself. Expression sharp, confident, deadly. Alina could feel him watching her. She let him. Let him see what he'd failed to destroy. The traitors had chosen this battleground, high ground, open space, nothing but sky above and stone beneath. They thought it would trap them, limit them. But Alina wasn't made of earth. She was born of moonlight and fire. Lucien leaned in, his voice low and steady. "We end it today." She nodded once. "No more running." From across the field, Kaelin raised his hand. The signal. Wolves howled as one. Then they charged. The world exploded. Claws on stone. Teeth on flesh. Magic flaring like heat lightning. Alina moved with the grace of instinct, shifting mid-sprint into her wolf form, white as snow, streaked with silver, eyes burning violet. She hit the first rogue with full force, tearing him to the ground, her magic lashing out like flame in every direction. Lucien's roar echoed across the mountain. He was a storm incarnate, tearing through Kaelin's front lines with brutal efficiency. Every strike was precise. Every movement screamed dominance. The true Alpha King no longer restrained by fear or tradition. Together, they carved a path toward Kaelin. He waited at the summit, blade drawn, body humming with dark energy. His wolf form shimmered just beneath his skin, black as pitch, pulsing with twisted magic fed by stolen blood. "Come to die, then?" he sneered as Alina and Lucien approached. Lucien stepped forward first, eyes hard. "No. We came to end this." Kaelin lunged. The clash of steel echoed like thunder. Lucien met him head-on, their blades locking, sparks flying as magic burst between them. They fought like equals, claws raking, teeth bared, raw power meeting raw rage. Kaelin fought dirty. Lucien fought smart. But it wasn't Lucien who ended it. It was Alina. She waited for the opening, watched Kaelin overextend, saw the moment arrogance blinded him. She shifted mid-leap, returning to her human form, and drove her blade through his back, right where his stolen magic pooled like rot. Kaelin screamed. Lucien didn't hesitate. He drove his sword into the traitor's chest, clean through. Silence fell. Then, slowly, the rogue army crumbled. One by one, they dropped their weapons, fell to their knees. The bond of fear severed. The kingdom reclaimed. Alina stood over Kaelin's broken body, chest heaving, blood on her hands. She didn't look away, didn't flinch. Lucien turned to the crowd of soldiers, his voice thunder over the mountain. "The war is over. The false king is dead." He looked to Alina. "She is your Luna. Your queen." The wolves howled. Not in rage. Not in grief. In allegiance. Alina looked out over them, not just survivors, but her people. Her pack. And for the first time since the fire that stole her childhood, since the moon chose her blood, she felt whole. Untouched no longer. Unclaimed no longer. She was bonded. Made. Risen. Lucien came to her side. Pressing his forehead to hers, his blood still stained his collar. His hands were bruised, but his eyes were steady. They had survived. More than that, they had won. The coronation came days later. No gold, no crown, just moonlight, wolves, and a vow spoken under stars older than memory. They ruled together, untamed, united, unstoppable. And when the night fell quiet, when the kingdom slept and their chambers were theirs alone, Alina would press her lips to Lucien's skin, and he would whisper the truth only she ever heard. That his reign began the day he met her, and it would end the day he let her go, which meant it would never end at all.